Coming up on Network Africa today, opposition in Sierra Leone disputes provisional results announced by the Electoral Commission. Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, RSF, announces unilateral ceasefire ahead of Eid celebrations. Plus, Zimbabwe's opposition leaders make their presence felt in South Africa as preparations for the 2023 elections heighten. Hello and welcome to Network Africa on Channels Television. Thank you for joining us. I'm Anne Mwawadu. As counting continues in Sierra Leone's hotly contested general election, the former mayor of the Free Town has now echoed opposition allegations that the tallying process is not transparent. The sentiment is echoed by the Commonwealth Observer Group, which says a lack of clarity on how Sierra Leone presidential election results are being tallied has led to charges of a lack of transparency. He also asked the Electoral Commission to ensure that more transparency will be done while announcing the remaining results. The chairman of the Observer Group, Yemi Osinbajo, says that there were reports of logistical challenges which caused delays on election day, but the election has been largely peaceful. And the opposition candidate has now called for the provisional results in Sierra Leone daylight robbery, alleging that his electoral agents were not allowed to verify the ballot counting. With a majority of ballots already counted, the incumbent, Julius Maada Bio, appears to have a strong lead over his main rival, Val Samura Kamara. Reports say that Mr. Bio's success can more likely be attributed to a series of strategic electoral alliances he made in the course of the campaign, including the opposition strongholds. The European Union observers have criticized the Electoral Commission for lack of transparency and noted incidents of violence in some regions during the election. And still talking about Sierra Leone, the Electoral Commission has now announced Julius Maada Bio as a leading presidential poll after 60% of the votes have been counted. Mr. Bio, who is 59, is running for a second term against 12 opponents. His biggest rival is the All People's Congress, the APC candidate Samura Kamara, who narrowly lost to Bio in the last election in 2018.
A provisional results sheet shows Bio has received over 1 million votes so far, compared with just under 800,000 for Kamara. Final verified results will be announced within the next 24 hours. It has been a tense encounter, with the APC reporting their election representatives were attacked and intimidated in 3 districts on election day, while the Election Commission outlined several instances where officials were beaten or intimidated.
I think it comes down to the institution to dispel those myths or suspicions. Because if you say opposition parties, allege that there's not been level playing field by the ECSL, I think it behoves them to ensure that they are transparent and accountable to all the parties every step of the way. That's the only way to dispel it. So, for example, make sure that the counting process is transparent, make sure that the tallying process is transparent, make sure that the results publication processes are beyond transparent. That's the only way you can allay the fears and the doubts of the opposition party.
A woman was found severely wounded and without a pulse at Sierra Leone's opposition party headquarters on Sunday after police surrounded the building during a post-election news conference. International observers have voiced concern about lack of transparency in the tallying of ballots.
I don't think there's been stagnation, because when you have citizens' action and you have many players who have been involved, I would not think that there's been stagnation. So there's been some progress, but those amounts or quantum of progress I cannot ascribe to institutional progress. Rather, we have seen outside these institutions that non-state actors' action, citizens' action, voices have inspired some movements, but in terms of progress, I am afraid I will not give a pass mark.
Sierra Leoneans fear more unrest could occur as results are announced, particularly if none of the 13 candidates secures 55% of the votes cast, a situation that would trigger a runoff between the top 2. Bio addressed the nation after the publication of provisional results on Monday evening and called on citizens to keep the peace. The country is still emerging from a 1991 to 2002 civil war in which more than 50,000 were killed and hundreds maimed.
Well, we have the Executive Director of YAGA Africa, Samson Itodo, who's been monitoring elections there, and he's currently an election observer in Sierra Leone. Thank you very much for joining us on Network Africa, Samson. All right, I guess we'll get back to Samson when we have him. But let's continue in Sudan, where the heads paramilitary rapid support forces have already declared a unilateral ceasefire, which is due to come into effect today in time for the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Adha on Wednesday. The pause in the conflict, which the Sudanese army was announced in an audio recording broadcast on All Arabiya television by the leader of the RSF, Mohammed Dagolo, better known as Hemeti. General Hemeti also condemned abuses carried out against civilians, including those perpetrated by his own forces. The RSF has been accused of being behind several violations in Darfur. And citizens of countries in the Middle East and North Africa struggling with rampant inflation and rising costs of food are finding it very difficult to sell or even buy sheep for slaughter, a tradition upheld for years during the annual Muslim holiday. The Eid al-Adha, one of Islam's two main festivals, marks the climax of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, when Muslims slaughter animals to commemorate the willingness of Abraham to sacrifice his son on God's command, often distributing meat to the poor.
Citizens in the region who are gearing up by visiting cattle markets that usually spring up in the weeks prior are hit by a stark rise in prices when compared to previous years.
Because of the war in Sudan, the sheep usually brought in from Sudan have not come in. And that is why prices are higher and people can't afford to buy like they do every year. The situation is bad, as you can see here. People here look at the sheep but can't afford to buy them.
Traders say the price of fodder used to feed their animals and the transportation has almost tripled. Now customers team up to share one animal so they can celebrate the Eid with some festivity. Some are saving costs in other areas.
I have 4 children and I bought them clothes for the last Eid, and we kept them in good shape to wear them for the coming Eid. This is a new phenomenon. We used to wear new clothes every Eid.
However, many are now compelled between the choice of upholding the centuries-old tradition or skipping it altogether.
Since the onset of the conflict in Sudan on April the 15th, Chad faces a massive influx of refugees from Sudan, together with Chadian returnees. According to the latest figures, approximately 150 people crossed to the Chadian border by mid-June, and numbers are still rising. On June the 16th and the 17th, following yet another outbreak of violence in El Geneia, the major city in West Darfur, thousands of destitute people, most of them women and children, arrived in Adre, which is a Chadian border city, where they quickly outnumbered the local population. They arrived in the Chadian region, which is already in a dire situation with poor access to clean water and basic social services. As the rainy season is now starting, roads are becoming impassable, also hampering relief operations. UNICEF in Chad and partners are on the ground providing support, but urgent need is still needed to respond to the growing and pressing needs of the people. Let's head to South Africa now, where the Mineral Resources Minister, Gwede Mantashe, says that more suspected illegal miners have probably died in the abandoned Virginia mine in the Free State. He says that during his visit to the mine following reported deaths of at least 31 suspected illegal miners believed to be Lesotho nationals. The previous owner of that mine, Harmony Gold, which stopped operations back in the 1990s, confirmed that methane levels were very high in the ventilation shaft. Methane is the highly explosive greenhouse gas often found in underground mines. It poses serious safety and health threats to mine workers.
There is suspected 31 here I can tell you, if we ultimately reach that area, we'll find more than 31. In Krugersdorp, we saw the death of 21. In Gloria, we saw the death of 17. Those numbers vary from mine to mine, meaning that illegal mining is actually, I described last week, as soldiers who attack our economy dying in combat. We can't say they are South Africans, but what we know is that there are Lesotho citizens, many who are involved. But at this point in time, all we are saying is that movements that are shown by the movements of methane reflect that there may be some movements underground, because that shaft is not an easy shaft where you walk in and out. It's quite a difficult shaft, and that is where our suspicion comes.
In Zimbabwe, the opposition party Citizens Coalition for Change, led by advocate Nelson Chamisa, hosted a presidential rally in Johannesburg, South Africa. The rally was specifically organized for Zimbabweans living in the diaspora under the theme, "The Future is Here." The rally comes at a time when the country is preparing for its general elections on the 23rd of August 2023. The party leader, Nelson Chamisa, says that he is confident that his party will do very well in the upcoming local government elections. The opposition leader in the country says that he will try and lure diaspora votes in the upcoming elections. Our correspondent in South Africa, Innocent Samosa, reports.
This is the first presidential rally for Zimbabwe's new look opposition party, Citizens Coalition for Change, ahead of the August elections. Attendees were treated to traditional music, dance performances, and various cultural displays, creating an atmosphere of celebration and unity. The leader of Citizens Coalition for Change, CCC, Nelson Chamisa, is in South Africa to lure diaspora votes.
We need a leader who understands that to be able to move forward, we must preserve the legacy of the liberation struggle. How do we preserve it? We preserve it by the transformational promise that we are going to develop and promise the people of Zimbabwe and deliver it. We want to create an economy that functions. We want to create a democracy that functions.
Nelson Chamisa thanked the South African government for extending the Zimbabwean exemption permit period.
It's an African to overstay. When you have visited, there is a period. You must look at your time. We have been given the hospitality here, and thank you for the exemption permits. Thank you for the extension of those permits. Thank you for treating us as your fellow African brothers and sisters.
I don't think it's late. It's coming at the right time. Because we did the voters mobilization. So now what we're just doing here is to encourage people to go and vote. So we know that victory is certain. So here we're just putting the final nail on the coffin.
Many Zimbabweans have left the country for greener pastures. A handful of them say they have nothing to go back to.
Because in Zimbabwe we don't have jobs. Our future is not okay because we can't find jobs in Zimbabwe. We can't find even food. We are suffering to get food in Zimbabwe.
What will it take for you to remove ZANU-PF?
Well, it takes a united Zimbabweans from all corners of Zimbabwe, from Matebeleland, from Mashonaland, from Manicaland, from Harare, from every angle and corner of Zimbabwe. Then once we unite, then we vote. Once we vote, we will automatically remove this regime.
Well, the atmosphere here was filled with anticipation as they appealed to their fellow citizens living in South Africa to be part of the upcoming elections. Party leader, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, also mentioned that they faced many obstacles in Zimbabwe, including the unlawful arrest of some of his party members. But he says that he is quite confident that they will do well in this upcoming elections. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Samosa, Channel Television News.
And still ahead on Network Africa, we'll still be talking politics in Zimbabwe, and we'll be speaking to Xavier Kasuku, who is the presidential hopeful, another opposition of Mr. Nelson Chamisa in the Zimbabwe's election. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa. Let's continue with politics in Zimbabwe, where another presidential hopeful, Saviour Kasukwere, who is a 53-year-old Zimbabwean politician, had served in various government and political party portfolios. He's best remembered in politics as Mugabe's last national political commissar, member of the Politburo and ZANU-PF Central Committee, which is its highest policy organ. Mr. Kasukwere is in South Africa, and he joins us now virtually to discuss this and more. Thank you very much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
Now, we know it's usually the case that incumbents have a formidable base, and most times they win the votes. What do you think your chances are of becoming president in Zimbabwe?
Well, I have the best chances ever. Why? Because we are going into an electoral process for the first time after the coup that happened in 2017, where President Mugabe was removed from power. This is an election where we hope and trust that fear and intimidation will not be order of the day, and where we are also going to be participating from those who work with President Mugabe, the incumbent president, as well as from the opposition. So this is an election we look forward to. It has that very important responsibility in our history to cure the coup. We hope and trust that the world will support us, Africa will support us, so that we can put the past behind us and start rebuilding our country.
You're in South Africa now. How much support do you think you can get from Zimbabwean community right there?
Well, there is a lot of support here in South Africa. As you are aware, that a number of our people are also living in this place. And in fact, to the extent that literally, wherever you move around, whether it's in the restaurants, in the various places here, you come across very disappointed Zimbabweans who want to come back home, but who always say to you, Mr. President, go back and fight for us. We want to go back home. We want to work in our country. We want to develop our country. They actually have been the source of encouragement to me, and there are quite a lot of them. We have quite a number of Zimbabweans who are in the diaspora today.
What are the feelers you are having or getting from the Zimbabwean community in South Africa about voting, since you're taking a campaign there for them?
They are quite excited, and they have found the hope and reason now to vote. When my name came up, I had quite a number of them come to me and say, thank you very much. We were expecting you to join the race and help us make a difference in our country. They're actually working together to putting together transport mob to come to Zimbabwe and vote. We expect to see quite a number of Zimbabweans during the elections who will be returning residents, just coming to participate in the elections, make their views known, cast their ballots, and come back.
We know there's already a standing relationship between South Africa and Zimbabwe, but how would you improve these relations in terms of economy and every other thing that comes with it for both countries?
We have to lighten the burden on our colleagues in South Africa by also working hard as Zimbabweans and being responsible for our own affairs. Our challenges and crisis has dragged for so long, and I think it is time we put our house in order and stem the migration of our people from Zimbabwe to South Africa and as well in the entire region. Second, we are an economic giant. We are probably the second largest economy, which was the second largest bilateral trading partner of South Africa. We need to restore that by proactively getting our industries, our economy up and running so that we can retain the skilled manpower we have in our country. We can create jobs. We can also help in terms of providing the social services that are required. Many of our people are now crossing the border to come to South Africa for medical help, for medical attention, as well as just general support, which I think has placed a huge burden on the South African government, on the South African municipalities, and this does not augur well for our relations. They're a friendly neighbor. We are big trading partners. We need to go back to basics and restore a functional relationship where our economies integrate, but there is none of the two which must become a burden on the other. So Zimbabwe has to step up to the plate and play a responsible role in ensuring that South Africa's economy is not burdened, but rather we are supportive of the growth of the South African economy.
All right, thank you very much for coming on Network Africa. Zimbabwean presidential candidate Saviour Kasukwere. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
To other stories now, some unwholesome trends in the current global environment present a host of challenges for the boy child, hence the need for more attention to their education, parental guidance and mental health. This was the consensus of speakers at the conference tagged The Boy-Child Conversation, Kings Awake 2, put together by a non-governmental organization. Our correspondent Bukola Koka has more on this report.
From the onset, the energy in the room was powerful, suggestive of the masculine nature of the upcoming discourse. Providing the adrenaline for the excitement here are students from public secondary schools in Lagos who have come for a dose of inspiration from this conversation on the boy child, the Kings Awake 2, powered by public interest group Deborah's Palace Initiative.
Role models are crucial. We need to highlight the importance of positive role models and mentorship in shaping the lives of boys.
I realized that when people meet...
And the theme, Navigating Teen to Adulthood, touches on the core of challenges that shape the boy child's adolescence. The panelists came prepared, narrating real stories.
She went to this private school around our community where we grew up and said, you know what, I'll work for you guys as a cleaner. Just let my son go to school here. Through my life, I went to school to college on a scholarship because I was on the chess team. And 5 years ago, it wasn't like I was successful or anything, but I felt, that sense of duty to go back to Ikorodu, the place where I grew up, and do the same thing for other children like me.
Helping them to surmount the challenge of pressure.
Don't allow that to discourage you. In fact, underneath that comparison is love. It's because they want you actually to be better than what you are currently doing.
And situating identity.
We started at the smallest level, that's the councillorship. And today I'm the deputy leader of the Legislative House of Obafemi, the youngest in Nigeria. But the first thing I had to have that mind going into that space as a child of God.
For the convener, challenges associated with male teenagers are not any easier to bear. Hence the need for the boy-child conversation.
There's a lot of focus on the girl child and little or none on the boy child. The world, the society, parents, families should understand that this is a human being too as well that needs to be focused on, hence the reason why we started the boy-child conversation.
Teenage boys here understand only too well the pressure from parents and peers alike on the need to succeed. Some of them summon up courage to share their experiences.
I feel pressure in this kind of life whereby for the 16 years of my life, I never used an Android phone. I just got my Android phone 4th of June.
Most of the superstars that I've blown already, that they are using jazz, using juju, using all those kind of stuff. Like, you can't make it if it does not belong, like you don't belong to any cult or stuff.
Where the girl child lacks the opportunities, the advocacy has resounded across the globe for equity with the male child. But here, advocates at this third conference on the boy child have identified just a little deficit in their attention paid to the issues of the boy child. And so they crave more attention to their mental health, support for their parents in nurturing them, and ultimately support for the dreams of the boy child. From Lagos Island, Bukola Koka for Channels Television News.
Well, this is where we draw the curtains on Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Mwawade.